بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وأفضل الصلاة وتم التسليم على سيدنا وحبيبنا ومولانا وقرة أعيننا سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وأزواجه وذريته ومن اهتدى بهديه ليوم الدين. تركنا المحجة البيضاء ليلها كنهارها لا يزيغ عنها إلا هالك. ثم أما بعد. First, I apologize being a little bit late. I got some traffic in the way. So we're in the third session and third hadith, so I think we're making good progress. Like we said, it's how, not how much. So we had left off with the hadith of Anas radiallahu anhu about, Ubadah ibn Samit about bay'ah, correct? So we had covered the first part of the hadith, and now we move on to the second part. But before we begin, I would appreciate if we hold off the questions till the end. I know sometimes things pop in people's heads and you want to ask right away, but sometimes you'll find that the question is answered as we explicate, and sometimes it's not, so it's okay. But just in the interest of time, I appreciate to hold them off till the end, inshallah, and I'll leave time for that at the end. So this hadith, we'll just read it again. قال الإمام البخاري رحمه الله ونفعنا بعلوم في الدارين آمين عن عبادة بن الصامت رضي الله عنه وكان شهد بدرا وهو أحد النقباء ليلة العقبة أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال وحوله عصابة من أصحابه بايعوني على ألا تشركوا بالله شيئا ولا تسرقوا ولا تزنوا ولا تقتلوا أولادكم ولا تأتوا ببهتان تفترونه بين أيديكم وأرجلكم ولا تعصوا في معروف فمن وفى منكم فأجره على الله ومن أصاب من ذلك شيئا فعوقب في الدنيا فهو كفارة له ومن أصاب من ذلك شيئا ثم ستره الله فهو إلى الله إن شاء عفى عنه وإن شاء عاقبه فبايعناه على ذلك. So Ubadah ibn Samit, who had witnessed the Battle of Badr, was one of the representatives of the Ansar or the Aws and Khazraj on the night of Aqaba, narrated the Prophet ﷺ said in the presence of a group of his companions, it says large group, I don't think it was that large a group. Give me your oath of allegiance that you will not associate anything with Allah, that you will not steal, that you will not commit adultery, that you will not kill your children, and you will not falsely accuse, and that you will not disobey in what is good. Whoever fills this amongst you, his reward is with Allah, and whoever commits one of these matters then gets punished in this world, it is an expiation for him. Whoever commits one of these matters but is shielded by Allah, it is up to Allah. If He wishes, He will forgive him, and if He wishes, He punishes him. And we gave our allegiance upon this, and we corrected that last week, the translation. So I think we were talking about the things that they had given their oath upon, namely that they don't associate partners with Allah, nor do they steal, nor do they fornicate, nor do they kill their children, and I think we left off there, right? So the next one, وَلَا تَأْتُوا بِبُهْتَانٍ تَفْتَرُونَهُ بَيْنَ أَيْدِيكُمْ. Did we talk about buhtan last time? We did, right? I remember we defined buhtan. We said that it's one of the sins of the tongue, right? And one of the sins of the tongue, the specific thing about this particular sin, unlike backbiting, for example, is that also it's done publicly, in a public way, and it's done to humiliate someone. So I would probably say it would be something like slander, probably the closest English word. And when we say sins of the tongue, we don't necessarily mean just things that you actually say. In any way that things can be communicated is what's intended. So whether you write it or whether you put it on social media, or whatever way it might be, it all falls under the same rubric of buhtan, to slander someone, to not only say something false about them, but say in a way to humiliate them, to cause them major embarrassment, or to accuse or character assassinate them. Now here, when the Prophet ﷺ, the Arabic phrase تفترونه, al-iftira, means to falsely accuse. That's the iftira, to make something up. بين أيديكم وأرجلكم. This part is not translated because it's like a metaphor, but it literally means between your hands and your legs. And this can have a variety of meanings. One of the meanings is that even though buhtan is a sin of the tongue, the way that it may be spread from one place to the next is people carry that. So it's kind of giving the indication to the idea that once you plant a false rumor, it can spread very quickly. And that's why it's associated with what we're looking at, major sins here: stealing and associating partners with Allah and fornicating. These are very major sins. So you might ask, why is it associated? Why is it in the same grouping as these things? One of the reasons for that is because it's not just what you actually made up, but the way that it's spread, you can completely destroy a person, right? And then very difficult for one to gain one's reputation after the fact. Right? Even nowadays, if a newspaper misquotes or says something wrong or mentions the wrong name about someone, the most you'll get out of it is some correction on, page 12. Whereas the headlines was that particular thing that they're not going to put a headline about correcting it. It'll be a correction somewhere in the end. So it's never going to be good enough. You can never really correct that mistake. And I think we mentioned last week, if you read Surah An-Nur, that talks about Aisha radiallahu anha and the prevarication or the lie, hadithat al-ifk, that was made up against her, the Quran condemns those, not just who spread it, but those who like it to be spread. يحبون أن تشيع الفاحشة. They love for the fahisha, for this type of false talk or this corruption to be spread. في الذين آمنوا, in the people that believe. And it's traditionally been one of the tactics of those who want to disparage someone and they don't really have anything negative to say about them. So they try to, if they're in a position where the person is being disparaged, if they're in a position where they're bringing some change, oftentimes there'll be resistance to that change, and so they'll attack the character of the person because they can't really attack anything else. If you look to where people attack Islam, for example, usually they attack the person of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, because there's nothing really for them to grab onto except in his person. And that was the way it was in his time, because they called him a magician, they called him a soothsayer, they called him a liar. And even nowadays, people attack the character of the Prophet ﷺ. So this buhtan, taftarunahu, making it up. And I should mention also, if someone does that to you, the solution is not to do the same to them. So if they spread false witness, a false rumor, they accuse you of something that you're completely innocent from, the response is not to do the same to them. Right? The Quran says, ولا يستوي السيئة ولا تستوي السيئة والحسنة والسيئة ادفع بالتي هي أحسن. The good deed and the bad deed are not equal. ادفع بالتي هي أحسن. Repel with a good deed. Right? It didn't say repel with a bad deed. Repel with something good. And if you do a bad deed yourself, the hadith says, اتبع السيئة الحسنة تمحوها. follow a bad deed with a good deed and it will erase it. So we don't have this Machiavellian approach where the ends justify the means, and if someone does something to us, then we do the same to them, and so forth. I remember I gave a khutbah a long time ago, over a decade ago, in New Brunswick, and I think I was talking about something about the Middle East, and children were being targeted or something like that. So I said, under no circumstances should any Muslims ever target any children, no matter who their parents are or what they have done and things like this. So someone came up to me after the khutbah and he said, well, they kill our children, so we should kill theirs. I said, since when do we go by their sharia? We go by our sharia, and our sharia says we don't do that. It doesn't matter what they do. So the basis of character, the basis of akhlaq, is not a reaction to what someone else is doing to you, but rather it's an internal state that you have, no matter what happens outside. So the buhtan, or the iftira between your arms and your legs, that's one possible meaning. Another possible meaning, they said, what is between your arms and your legs is your heart. So before you actually say something, it's usually based upon a state that you had inside to begin with. Because there are zahir al-ithm wa batin al-ithm. There are outward sins and there's also inward sins. And the inward sins are what push the outward sins. So someone is not going to do that, slander someone or disparage them that way, unless something's going on inside that's not right. So if you have hiqd, if you have enmity, you have rancor, you have jealousy, envy, hasad, these things, then they lead to these outward sins where you actually go the next step and say things with your tongue. So that means that the way to actually fix that is not just by stopping from saying certain things, that's definitely a part of it, but you get to the root of it, and the root of it is the state of your heart. So if you weren't a jealous person to begin with, if you weren't someone who has ill will for people in their heart, right? If you took that away, then the outward sins are not going to manifest themselves, they're not going to happen, because you've removed the cause. And so بَيْنَ أَيْدِيكُمْ وَأَرْجُلَكُمْ is pointing to what could be the cause, namely that it's the heart that begins with this iftira, right? And how many of the times probably we can recount in our days that we think about things we want to do to someone for what they did to us. We may not act upon them, right? If you have a little bit of taqwa, a little bit of fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you don't act upon them. But the higher state is that khatira, that thought to begin with, doesn't come. Or if it tries to come from shaitan or from your own deprived soul, then it bounces off and goes away. So ultimately you want to be able to be in a state where these things don't affect you to begin with. That's the more complete, that's kamal. وَلَا تَعْصُوا فِي مَعْرُوفٍ, and not to disobey in what is good. So the ma'roof, right, it's the same word from arafa ya'rifu, ma'rifatan, also urf, similar word. It means that which is known, literally, to know something. That's what ma'rifa is, to know. Ma'roof means that what is known as to be like a common good. It's known by everyone. وَلَا تَعْصُوا فِي مَعْرُوفٍ. In other words, that which is considered to be good. And so you would not disobey in that. Right? It could have sufficed to say, وَلَا تَعْصُوا, don't disobey the Prophet ﷺ, don't disobey Allah. But it said, تَعْصُوا فِي مَعْرُوفٍ, in that which is considered good. Which is indication that the Sharia, the lawgiver, is not going to point to anything, it's not going to command you to anything that's inherently bad. Nor is it going to prohibit anything that is inherently good. It doesn't exist in our Sharia. All that is haram, all that is prohibited is bad, is khabis. And all that is good or commanded to is tayyib, in of itself. In of itself. Whether there's a command there or whether there's a prohibition there. In other words, our Sharia doesn't have what's called niqmah. Niqmah means sort of a punishment, where tayyibat, where good things can be prohibited based upon previous behavior. The Sharia of the children of Israel has that. Bani Israel, as the Quran mentions. فَبِظُلْمٍ مِّنَ الَّذِينَ هَادُوا حَرَّمْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ طَيِّبَاتٍ أُحِلَّتْ لَهُمْ وَبِصَدِّهِمْ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ كَثِيرًا وَأَخْذِهِمُ الرِّبَا. Right? So it says فَبِظُلْمٍ, because of the oppression or the wrongdoing, الَّذِينَ هَادُوا, the Yahud, the Jews, or the Bani Israel, the ancient ones, not the ones today, the ancient ones. We have prohibited from them طيبات, pure good things. So in their Sharia, for example, certain things they couldn't eat that we can eat, like ducks and goose and geese, things like this. That was prohibited. The meat that was right next to the bone, as the Quran mentions, was prohibited from them from eating. They were only allowed to pray in the mihrab, which is their prayer niche, their prayer space. If they traveled, they'd have to come back and make up all their prayers. If something of najasa, something impure, got on their clothing, we just wash it off. They actually had to cut it out, or discard the garment to begin, So these are tayyibat, right? But because of their dhulm, right, these things were made haram. حرمنا عليهم طيبات أحلت لكم وبصدهم عن سبيل الله كثيرا وأكلهم الربا. So it mentions the things that they did, and one specific thing the ayah mentions is eating usury-based transactions, riba. So that means ta'su fi ma'ruf is also, I believe, an indication that we don't see ourselves like the Bani Israel as a chosen people, right? Because we're talking about what's ma'ruf. We're only chosen, Allah only chooses us in as much as we choose to do the right thing. If we don't choose to do the right thing, there's nothing special about us. It's not inherent in us, right? When the Quran says تِلْكَ خَيْرُ أُمَّةٍ أُخْرِجَتْ لِلنَّاسِ, this is the best ummah, the best nation, community that has been put forth for the people. It doesn't stop there. It gives an attribute of who those people are. تَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَتَنْهُونَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ وَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ. Right? You enjoin the good. تَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ, same word, ma'ruf. وَتَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ, and you prohibit the munkar, that which is in of itself is corrupt. وَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ, and you believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then you can make, not even at that point you make a claim, but you can say maybe this ayah might apply to us. But to say that we're special, we're chosen, we're kada because of who we're affiliated with, or who our parents were, or even who our Prophet ﷺ was. Even who our Prophet ﷺ. I mean by this, when you say, I am from Ummat Muhammad ﷺ, and you mean it in a sense that I am just merely on the basis of my affiliation, that makes me special. No, that doesn't make you special. Makes you special is if you follow Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If you love Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Merely saying that I belong, just an affiliation, right? That's a type of tribalism. Like when people get offended, that's my prophet. Why didn't you get offended when they disparage Jesus? He's also your prophet. Or Moses, or Abraham, or David, or Solomon. They're also your prophets. Why specifically Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Well, he's my prophet. My in what sense? My that your little tribalism, your tribe, so you're the tribe of Islam. We're not the tribe of Islam, right? We're not an ideological tribe. We're not an ethnic tribe. Islam doesn't know a specific ethnic tribe or an ideological one. Islam knows following Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So ta'su fi ma'ruf, that which the lawgiver, which the Sharia, either via the direct commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, or what has been conveyed by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that's a ma'ruf. And it's always good in of itself. If you have an issue with something of the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then the proper etiquette is to question yourself, not to question the ruling. Question yourself. Question your understanding initially. To have a question, is nothing wrong with that. There's something you don't quite get, you don't quite understand. Why does it have to be this way? Recently I had a sister send me a message on, and she said that I don't understand this iddah. You know, when a woman's husband dies and then she has 4 months and 10 days that she's supposed to leave zina, and she's sort of supposed to spend every night in her house and not go out. And I don't understand all of that. It seems like oppressive. And she went on this long list of things of why she doesn't think it's right. I don't have an issue with her questioning. That's perfectly legitimate. But the approach, right, to see, you know, to declare it oppressive, to declare it this, how can this be right? Rather than question the ruling, question yourself. Say, how is my understanding so off if I think that? Maybe I gotta fix something about my understanding. Or maybe I don't understand the ruling. Maybe it's not what I think it is. But instead of people just jumping in, we're living in an age of nihilism, of narcissism, and everything is relative, and it's more about me and how I feel about it and how I react to it and what's good for me. And so we're surrounded by this. And so this attitude, when it comes through in our practice of the deen, frankly, it's very ugly. Right? Because the deen is not about you so much, but it's about you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then if you put you and Allah, well, what does that mean? I'm nothing. It's really about Allah. It's not about you. فَمَنْ وَفَّى مِنْكُمْ فَأَجْرُهُ عَلَى اللَّهِ. So whoever fulfills this amongst you, his reward is with Allah. In other words, fulfills all that was said before, leaves out all these things. You might ask, well, why these specific things? Why didn't he, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, mention, you know, they're all actually prohibitions. None of them are commands. There are things to leave, things not to do. And as we said before, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in his early mission was more about nidara than bishara. Nidara means he was forewarning. He was inviting people to Tawheed. He was giving them, instilling with them the concepts of Tawheed. Make that strong. And then what takes precedence is avoiding things that obviate Tawheed. Obviously, like shirk, like associating partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So whoever fulfills this amongst you, then his reward is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَمَنْ أَصَابَ مِنْ ذَلِكَ شَيْئًا فَعُوقِبَ فِي الدُّنْيَا فَهُوَ كَفَّارَةٌ لَهُ. And whoever fulfills this amongst you is reward with Allah. Whoever commits one of these matters then gets punished in this world is an expiation for him. This particular part, most of the ulama derive a particular principle from it, namely that if one commits one of these sins that is punishable by the Sharia, by an Islamic court, by a judge, not by the vigilante group in whatever province the tribal elders have declared it, no, but by a legitimate Islamic court, Islamic judge, then it's as if that sin wasn't committed, it's expiated. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala won't take him to task in the next life. And it's for this reason that some of the Sahaba would actually go to the Prophet ﷺ and confess their sins, knowing that they would face punishment, in some cases death. Like Al-Mar'a Al-Khuthaymiyya, who went to the Prophet ﷺ. She was one of the people of the Ansar, and she told the Prophet ﷺ, you know, I committed adultery. Prophet ﷺ turned away from her. He didn't want to hear it. Because she's not obligated to do that. She doesn't have to do that. No witnesses came forward, she doesn't have to confess. So he turned away, but she insisted. So the next time she told him, he said, she told him she was also pregnant. Not by her husband, but by... So he told her, then wait till you have the baby. Then come back, if you want. In other words, he wasn't obligated to come back that time either. But she waited, she was patient. 9 months later, or 5 or 6 months when she knew she was pregnant, she came back later. He said, well, you have to feed the baby. Wait till the breastfeeding period is finished. That's like 2 years. Again, she came back, she insisted. And so, based upon her insistence, they had to apply the had punishment, which was death, by stoning. So one of the Sahaba, when he was throwing the stones, he said, La'natullahi alayk. He was cursing her. Prophet ﷺ turned to him and said that Don't say that. If this woman's tawbah, her repentance, was distributed amongst all of the people of Medina, it would have been enough, it would have sufficed them. So even in this instant, right, when a punishment is being applied, still doesn't mean that the person is maligned, doesn't mean that the person is damned, doesn't mean any of those things. In fact, it was based upon her insistence that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned this. Otherwise, idfa'u al-hudud bil-shubuhat. The principle says, don't try to apply these things. Try to find any doubtful matter. Try to find any reason not to apply it. So people would come and the Prophet ﷺ would say to them, well, maybe you're mistaken, maybe you didn't, because for adultery it has to be actual intercourse. So he would say, well, maybe you didn't really finish, and maybe you just thought it happened, it didn't. So he would try to push people away from applying that. Nowadays, we look for the excuse to apply it. Completely antithetical to the Sharia. And if you think about how the hudud, these criminal punishments, can be applied, it's almost impossible if you're going to base it upon witnesses. In fact, I am not aware in the Islamic history that anyone was executed based upon 4 witness testimony.